Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, ranking Urban Meyer's losses at Ohio State. And when you win 91% of the time and you've raised the bar to ridiculous expectations, that means that the losses hurt that much, and they are all significant because they typically, when you win almost all your games, when you do lose, it's significant and typically costs you a championship of some sort. And that's the legacy, partially, of Urban Meyer at Ohio State. So these are Urban Meyer's 10 worst losses at Ohio State. Oh, wait a minute. His 10 worst losses. We did his 10 greatest wins. Oh, he only lost 9 games. So I don't have to choose anything or leave anything out. These are Urban Meyer's 9 losses at Ohio State in 7 seasons. So I'm ranking them right here. Here we go. Number 9, Virginia Tech 35, Ohio State 21 in 2014 in Columbus. Yes, at the time, it seemed to be devastating. Urban Meyer had had 2 exceptional seasons in 2012 and 2013, had the thing on a roll at 24-2, and they face Virginia Tech in Week 2 in Columbus after defeating Navy in Week 1. J.T. Barrett, of course, the quarterback, unproven in replacing the injured Braxton Miller. J.T. Barrett overwhelmed in that game against a stacked Virginia Tech defensive line and cornerbacks that were exceptional on that team, remember, going to the NFL. And Ohio State's offensive line was unprepared and ill-equipped to deal with Virginia Tech. And the Buckeyes were down 28-21, driving for the tying score at about midfield late in the game with just about a minute to play, and J.T. Barrett threw the pick six that sealed it. Virginia Tech won 35-21. Well, that game may have actually proved to be a blessing in disguise. Ohio State pulled together, it galvanized this group, and they went on to obliterate everyone on down through the rest of the season and win the college football playoff and win the national championship. So the loss didn't really, in the long run, hurt them at all. They won the national championship. So that's why it's at number 9, and actually it may have catapulted this team to working harder, pulling together, and winning the national title. All right, the rest of them sting. Number 8, 2016, Penn State 24, Ohio State 21. The Buckeyes had dominated this series and dominated this game, 21-7 lead, and it appeared as though, this Penn State team was not the Penn State team that we've seen the last few years. This Penn State team was coming off 7-6, 7-6, 7-6. They had lost to Pitt. They lost to Michigan 49-10. They were playing better, but nobody expected this. Ohio State, a 17-point favorite, give up a blocked field goal, blocked punt, and they lose the game in Happy Valley 24-21. Well, it cost them the Big Ten championship, but ultimately they still had the opportunity to win the national championship. So despite the loss here, negating the Big Ten championship, keeping them from going to Indianapolis despite just the one loss in the Big Ten, Ohio State still got the college football playoff berth. So this loss couldn't have mattered that much. In terms of Big Ten championships, yes. In terms of the ultimate goal, the national championship, Ohio State still was given the opportunity by the playoff committee. This spelled Penn State emergence onto the national scene as they went on to the Rose Bowl, winning the Big Ten, and a New Year's Six the next year. And, of course, Penn State still in the top 10 or 12 in the country. So really, this spelled Penn State emergence more than any kind of decline for Ohio State. But at the same time, Ohio State did rally to beat Penn State the next 2 years. So big loss at the time, could have cost Ohio State, but they still get to the playoff, but do not win the Big Ten because of this loss. Loss number 8, Penn State 24, Ohio State 21 in 2016. All right, number 7, I'm rating the Orange Bowl loss to Clemson 40-35 above the Penn State loss, and this may not seem to make much sense from the perspective of the Penn State loss was against a rival in Big Ten play, cost the Buckeyes the Big Ten championship, and this is just a game in the Orange Bowl, which Ohio State had already blown the Big Ten championship against Michigan State. This was a big bowl game, but nobody was going to win a championship. They were both rated in the back half of the top 10 in the country. So for branding purposes, for a look, it was a big game, but it didn't much matter, right? Well, consider this. Clemson is now emerged a few years later. At the time, they were just emerging. Now, they have established themselves as arguably the second best program in college football. And one of the reasons why was this game right here. From a perception standpoint, now Clemson has defeated Ohio State in 3 bowl games. 1978 Gator, this game, and then, of course, the playoff 2 years later in 2016, or 3 years later in 2016. So perception standpoint, if the Buckeyes would have won this game in the Orange Bowl, then Clemson wouldn't be able to say that they've got the 3 bowl wins over Ohio State and are 3-0. It's a game that was a great game to watch, just 2 explosive offenses, talent all over the field, the likes of Sammy Watkins and Carlos Hyde, Devin Smith, all sorts of NFL players on both sides, especially on offense. And Ohio State led this game 29-20, scoring 20 consecutive points. They led 29-20 late in the third quarter. And when Philly Brown dropped a punt, muffed a punt, fumbled a punt, gave Clemson possession, that's when the game turned around. Clemson came back to win 40-35 and preserved the win on a Stephen Anthony interception of Braxton Miller with about a minute left at midfield. Clemson 40, Ohio State 35, Urban Meyer's 7th worst loss at Ohio State. Number 6 on the list is Oklahoma winning at the Shoe 31-16 in 2017. Well, remember that Ohio State had blown out Oklahoma in Norman the previous season, 45-24. And even though that was a significant win, that didn't make the list of Urban Meyer's top 10 wins at Ohio State. But that was actually a much younger team. This team was supposed to have come of age in 2017. They possibly exceeded not typical Ohio State expectations, but for anybody reasonable, they had the youngest team in the country in 2016. They went to Norman. They blew out the Sooners by 3 scores. The next season, they were a huge favorite, like a double-digit favorite, 8 to 10 points against Oklahoma. Baker Mayfield made them look silly. The offense was stagnant. They lost 31-16. They led going into the fourth quarter. Many people forget this because this score was a 2-score game. They led 10-9 going to the fourth quarter against Oklahoma, but they lost it 31-16, and this started to expose some chinks in the armor at Ohio State as they lost this one to the Sooners. All right, that's the Baker Mayfield flag planting game at midfield at the Shoe, game number 6. Urban Meyer's top 9 losses, his only 9 losses at Ohio State, ranked right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Game number 5 in 2013. The Big Ten Championship, losing to Michigan State 34-24. So consider this. Urban Meyer takes over. He wins all his games in 2012. Could have won a national championship, played for a national title, but of course, the team's on probation. So it was satisfying to an extent that he was on the scene and turning around Ohio State football, and they were going to be contenders on the national scene. That was pretty apparent, but they missed out that opportunity in 2012. Well, in 2013, they turned around, they go 12-0. But they had some issues. They were very talented, but had some issues, especially on defense, and those were exposed by Michigan, then Michigan State. So they squeezed by Michigan 42-41. They only had to defeat Michigan State to go to the BCS National Championship game against Florida State and Jameis Winston. Ohio State trailed in this game 17-0. They scored 24 unanswered points to take a 24-17 lead, which you would figure at that point, the better team with the more talent, having scored 24 straight, would hold on and win the game. But they did not. Michigan State scored the final 17 of the game and stopped Braxton Miller on a 4th down play at midfield, 27-24 game with about 4 minutes left. That pretty much sealed the deal. Michigan State hands Urban Meyer his first loss after 24 consecutive wins, 34-24 in the 2013 Big Ten Championship game, which denied, of course, Ohio State the Big Ten title and a shot at the national title. All right, we told you all these games were going to be big when you only lose 9 in 7 years. Game number 4, the 4th worst loss for Urban Meyer. Purdue 49, Ohio State 20. This game, in what now has become Urban Meyer's final season at Ohio State, cost the Buckeyes a college football playoff appearance. Enough said right there. Urban Meyer's final year. So this is not us looking back and saying Urban Meyer was at Ohio State for 17 years, and in season number 7, they could have went to the college football playoff and won the national title, but they lost that pesky Purdue game 49-20 to keep them out. And yeah, that was one of the misses. No, this one's big because Urban Meyer's final season, they missed the college football playoff because they not only lost, but they got ambushed, especially in the second half, losing 49-20 at Purdue. The worst loss of Urban Meyer's career, some would say. Certainly in terms of regular season point totals, 49-20 to Purdue. All right, loss number 3. In the ranking the losses in Urban Meyer's stay at Ohio State, 2016 national semifinal, Clemson 31, Ohio State nothing. This really showed that there might be some issues at Ohio State, that it was still a great program, that they still had elite talent, they were still going to recruit and bring in the best players, but they may have issues with the likes of this Clemson program had arrived. So think about it. Leading up to this, Urban Meyer goes undefeated in 2012. He comes this close to a BCS national championship game in 2013. Wins the national title in 2014. Has the best team on the field in 2015, but they lose the one game, but they're still dominant. Everything's good. They just missed out in 2015. Let's move on to 2016. They stub their toe at Penn State, but still get the Michigan win against the number 3 team in the country, get to the college football playoff, and as a 3-point favorite in the game, they get trounced 31-0. And the offense and the offensive woes for the next couple years were truly exposed in that game. They actually were against Michigan despite scoring 30 points. That was because they played overtime. That showed up against Michigan, so we should have known this was going to be difficult against that Clemson bunch and that D-line. And Clemson won it 31-0 over Ohio State. The worst point differential Urban Meyer has ever suffered anywhere. Bowling Green, Utah, Florida, Ohio State. His worst loss ever. His only shutout ever at the hands of the Clemson Tigers, 31-0. Ranking Urban Meyer's 9 losses at Ohio State, the second worst loss ever. Iowa 55, Ohio State 24, 2017. This is the cornerstone of the recent narrative that Ohio State's still great. They still have elite athletes, but they can't quite get to the top and win a national championship because they have these kind of letdowns that seem inexplicable. Like they can't be explained. How does Ohio State lose to a decent team, but a team that they're much more talented than, and lose 55-24? This kept them out of the college football playoff, much like the Purdue game this year in 2017, and it put together a narrative with the 2016 loss in the college football playoff to Clemson, 31-0, losing this game, and then extended the narrative against Purdue this season that what happens to this team once a year? Can we trust this team to play an elite game and against an elite team if they're going to have this kind of effort against Iowa? And there it is. It's the score that was ingrained in most college football fans' heads as the debate raged. Alabama, Ohio State for the college football playoff. Iowa 55, Ohio State 24. That was the game score that was most remembered and most talked about and most mentioned and typed online than any in college football, and it cost Ohio State. Urban Meyer's second worst loss, losing to Iowa 55-24 in 2017. The worst loss for Urban Meyer, the most crushing loss of his stay at Ohio State in 7 years, was the 2015 loss at home against Michigan State, 17-14. Unlike the Iowa loss, and certainly the Purdue loss, this was close, and it was also against a team that was ranked in the top 10 in the country that eventually went and won the Big Ten championship and went to the college football playoff. But Ohio State was a 2-touchdown favorite at home with what I still believe to be the best team in the country. They won the championship in 2014, and in terms of personnel, they barely lost anyone, brought that team back. They should have been better, and they didn't quite kick on all cylinders most of the season. After they lost this game, they showed us the true talent. They went to Michigan, won by 4 touchdowns. They beat Notre Dame by 3 scores in the Fiesta Bowl and finished 12-1 and number 3 in the country. But what cost them is losing the wrong game that season. Michigan State was handed the Big Ten championship by a Michigan punter who dropped a snap and threw the ball up in the air. Otherwise, while Buckeye fans were probably laughing a couple weeks earlier watching Michigan State be given a gift in a miracle against Michigan, in the end, that game, the Michigan State win, the miracle win at Michigan, in which they were given the gift of the punter throwing the ball up in the air, handed Michigan State the Big Ten championship. Otherwise, Ohio State loses to Michigan State. They still win the tiebreaker because Michigan State's got 2 losses in the Big Ten. They lost to Nebraska, and Ohio State goes to the Big Ten championship game. We assume they beat Iowa, and maybe they win a second consecutive national championship. This is certainly the biggest loss, the most crushing loss, considering the NFL talent, the arguably best team in the country, and that they lost to the wrong team in the wrong circumstance that cost them from possibly repeating as national champions in 2015. Worst loss in Urban Meyer's career in the rain at the shoe in 2015. Michigan State 17, Ohio State 14. Zeke Elliott only 13 carries in the game. All right, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. This is what we do here. Discuss, debate, and analyze college football. Bring you ratings and rankings like nobody else. If you have any requests, you bring them my way. What you're going to see over the next few weeks is us preview all the bowl games, predict all the bowl games. We're going to give you the bowl history of all the bowl games and the bowl history of all the participants in as many as I can get to. We'll start at the top with the elite teams and we'll go through, but my intent is to get to every team and preview all the bowl games, complete bowl coverage, college football playoff coverage, of course, and National Signing Day coming up in 2 weeks, December 19th. We will be all over that as well. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.